What's up guys, Saf here on SuperSaf TV and welcome to another SuperSaf style camera comparison, this time between the Huawei P30 Pro and the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. You guys know the drill, we'll be checking out all aspects of the cameras, front, rear facing, low light, video, audio, everything. Look out for the audio icon, you'll know which device the audio is coming from. And we're currently using the front facing cameras. Now with the S10 Plus you do have up to 4K recording from the front facing camera, so we are at 4K on the S10 Plus. We're at 1080p on the Huawei P30 Pro. And before we do the stabilization test, we are going to switch to 1080p from the S10 Plus as well, just to make things fair. Right, now we are at 1080p from both front-facing cameras, so that way the stabilization test will be fair. So just walking right now. Nice day for a change. Now let's go ahead and run. Now we've moved on to the rear-facing cameras on both devices. We are filming at 4K 30 frames a second. Just taking a look around. Okay, now just testing out the stabilization at 4K. Just walking. Now let's go ahead and run. Okay, now we're testing out the stabilization at 1080p. Usually things are better at 1080p. Walk once again and now run. Another thing we can test while we're on video is the optical zoom. So we've got up to 2 times optical zoom on the S10 Plus, but we've got 5 times optical zoom on the P30 Pro, so you can get in super close. Last thing we'll try on the video is the ultra wide. So let's see how stable both of these are when we're using the ultra wide for video. Man, that crow is super loud. Anyway, so let's just go ahead and run while we're using the ultra wide. Just testing out the autofocus on the S10 Plus. That dual pixel is so fast. Same test on the P30 Pro, and it's definitely not as fast as the S10 Plus, as you can see. So that was the video. Now before we move on to images, having a quick look at what we're working with here. For the front-facing cameras, the P30 Pro does have a much higher resolution, but the S10 Plus has a wider aperture and it also has a secondary camera, which is going to help with depth information. Now for the rear-facing cameras, we have similar setups in the sense that we have an ultra-wide, a primary, as well as a telephoto, but the S10 Plus has 2 times optical zoom, whereas the P30 Pro has 5 times optical zoom. And the P30 Pro also has a time of flight sensor, which should help with depth information. Now, if you want to customize the look of your S10 Plus or your P30 Pro, then definitely check out our channel sponsor Dbrand. They've got a huge selection of skins for smartphones, laptops, tablets, you name it. And I'll be leaving a link to them in the description below. Final thing to mention is that all images and video have been taken on automatic. I haven't tweaked any settings, and that's to keep things as fair as possible. Getting straight to the images, we're not going to start off with selfies because some of you guys get annoyed about that. Selfies will be a little bit later on. We're starting off with the rear-facing cameras. So using the primary rear-facing cameras on both devices, both doing a very good job overall. Slight differences in color, but no major deal. Now let's test out the zoom. So 2 times on the S10 Plus, and then we've got 5 times on the P30 Pro, and you can just see a massive difference. Although I would say that the shadow is a little bit more crushed when you do use the zoom camera on the P30 Pro compared to that on the S10 Plus, which has maintained more details in those shadows. Now, if we digitally zoom 5 times on the S10 Plus, just to kind of do a side-by-side comparison, you can see that because the P30 Pro, as expected, is optical, it's a lot sharper. The P30 Pro also has 10 times hybrid zoom. That's where it uses both optical and digital zoom. And if we try to replicate 10 times a digital zoom on the S10 Plus. Once again, you can see here that the P30 Pro is doing so much better. You can read all of the text here on this monument. Now, another outdoor shot, both doing good here. I'd say the S10 Plus is a little bit sharper and the blues are definitely more vibrant. Now, I'd say that the actual scene was somewhere in between these two, but both are doing good nevertheless. Once again, let's test out that zoom. And a huge difference, the P30 Pro, you can get in so much closer thanks to that 5x optical zoom. With the 10x hybrid zoom, once again, I've digitally zoomed 10 times on the S10 Plus just to kind of replicate it as close as possible. And the P30 Pro, so much sharper, very, very good in terms of zoom. Now an image of some flowers, both doing really good here. The P30 Pro is pulling out more details from the shadows from what I can see. And one thing to mention is that I have been using 10 megapixels on the P30 Pro because that is the default setting and that is the setting that it's going to get the best results at. But you can use 40 megapixels if you want. Now, if you do switch to 40 megapixels, you can see that the image does look quite different, and that's because the HDR is not working as well on 40 megapixels as it was on 10 megapixels. So those shadows are not as brightened as they were on the 10 megapixel version. And if we go in 100%, you can see that we can crop in so much further on the 40 megapixel sensor of the P30 Pro, although as mentioned, I do normally shoot at 10 megapixels because that is where you're gonna get the best results overall. Right, now a lot of you guys will know that one of my favorite features on smartphone cameras is an ultra wide, and both of these have an ultra wide camera, which I absolutely love. So here is a regular shot, both doing a good job. And are you ready for it? Boom! Look at that. Ultra wide is so awesome. But there's something that you'll notice straight away in this image, and that is that the S10 Plus is actually even wider compared to the P30 Pro. And that is something I do like. You can get more into your shot. Another example here, this wall of graffiti. This was the furthest back I could get because there was a road behind me and I didn't want to die. And here, once again, the S10 Plus from the exact same position, you're getting so much more into your shot. So for ultra wide, I do prefer the S10 Plus. Now, I know you guys have been waiting for some low light tests, and here is the Space Center in low light. And the P30 Pro, a brighter image overall. This is at normal settings, so just automatic. Now, if we do use Huawei's night mode, this is where it takes multiple shots over a few seconds. You can see that you've got an even brighter image. You can see more details in the background here as well. It's something that I definitely do like. And another low light shot, once again, the P30 Pro is brighter. You can see there's more detail in the background as well. This is that auto. Now, if we do use the night mode, it's a much brighter image. We can see so much more detail in the background, but it's not as sharp. Now, because it's taking a long exposure, one thing you do have to bear in mind is that if there's any movement in your shot or if your hand isn't as steady as possible, then the image isn't going to be as sharp as if you take it on automatic. So here you can see that although the image is a lot brighter, it's not as sharp. Now, a low light image indoors, and this is where the P30 Pro, that's red, yellow, and blue sensor compared to the red, green, and blue sensor on the S10 Plus is really shining here. You've got a much brighter image and a much better low light image. This is the automatic, and if we do use night mode, it's a little bit brighter, but once again, because of that longer exposure, the image is not as sharp. And I was trying to keep it as still as possible, but I'm assuming because the subjects are so close, any sort of little vibrations are being magnified. And you can see that the image is not as sharp as if you shot it on automatic. And personally, I do prefer the shot at automatic. I guess the night mode will be useful if you're taking a landscape or something like that at night. Now let's look at portrait mode. So this is where it's going to blur the background. The time of flight sensor should really help here. And in this shot, I think both are doing a really good job. If you look at the blur, it's also a gradual blur. So it's not just the same blur all across. If you look towards the floor area, the bricks are more in focus compared to when you go further back to that building. So I'd say both of these are really good. Now this is an interesting image because we do have a lot of light coming from the background. And here I do prefer the image on the S10 Plus. And that's because if you look towards the background, the S10 Plus has maintained those details in the background, whereas the P30 Pro has blown those out. And this is something that I did notice. Here's another image of the London Eye in the background. Because there was a lot of light in the background and we were in the shade, the P30 Pro has struggled to evenly expose the background as well as the foreground. The S10 Plus is definitely doing a much better, even job here. Now moving on to selfies. We've pushed these back for all the selfie haters. Anyway, the first image here, both are doing a really good job. The P30 Pro is wider. Now that's because we're using the default mode on the S10 Plus, but there is an option to go wider, and if we do that, then the angles are a lot more similar, so we will be shooting all of the selfies at this wide angle mode just so we have comparable results. And here I think both are doing a really good job. We've got great dynamic range. You can see that we can see all of those details in the background where the clouds are and the trees. The P30 Pro does seem sharper, however, and that is thanks to that massive 32 megapixels resolution that we have on the P30 Pro. And if we do go in 100%, you can see that we can get so much more detail. We can crop in so much further on the P30 Pro compared to the S10 Plus. I'm not sure if you'd want to crop in this close to my face and see all my imperfections, but anyway. Now if we use the portrait mode from the front-facing camera, this is where things get interesting because it looks like we lose that dynamic range on the P30 Pro, and you can see that the background is now blown out compared to the S10 Plus, and this is something that I noticed quite a bit. When you're using portrait mode, then the P30 Pro does tend to blow out the highlights. The edge detection on the P30 Pro is also not as good as the S10 Plus. If you look towards my sunglasses, there's some errors here, also towards my jacket, whereas the S10 Plus, thanks to that additional depth sensor, is doing a much better job. Another portrait shot, and once again we do have these similarities. The P30 Pro not doing a great job in terms of edge detection. My ears blurred as well as the edge of my sunglasses, whereas the S10 Plus is doing a much better job. Finally, some low light selfies, and the S10 Plus is definitely brighter here. This seems to be thanks to that wider aperture. But if we do use the front-facing flash, I now do prefer the P30 Pro image, which has better maintained the colors and it's also sharper. The S10 Plus has brightened up the image, but it's definitely towards the yellow side and it has washed out a little bit and it's not as sharp. And there we have it, guys. That is the SuperSaf style camera comparison between the Huawei P30 Pro and the Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. In terms of my opinions, I'd say for the front-facing camera, I would have to give the overall win to the S10 Plus. Although the P30 Pro was sharper, thanks to that high resolution, the S10 Plus did perform better in portrait mode. For the edge detection, it had better dynamic range. And also in video, you do have the option of 4K, so it was sharper in video. For the rear-facing cameras, when it comes to zoom and low light, the win definitely has to go to the P30 Pro. That 5x optical as well as that 10x hybrid zoom is insane. It's the best zoom that I've tested on any smartphone camera. And that super spectrum camera where Huawei are using red, yellow and blue instead of red, green and blue does seem to have paid off because low light images, even on auto, do look very good. And this may just be the new low light champ. You've also got night mode, which works really well for landscapes and things. Once again, do bear in mind that if there is any movement or if your hands are not steady, then these images won't be as sharp, but it's really nice to have that option. I wish there was something like this on the S10 Plus, but unfortunately we do not have this. But I did prefer the ultra wide camera on the S10 Plus. It's actually wider compared to the P30 Pro. For video, although both were good, I would have to give the overall win to the S10 Plus. The footage from the primary camera as well as the ultra wide was more stable. You've got better autofocus, you've got better slow motion, and you've also got the option of HDR10 Plus as well as 4K up to 60 frames a second. You can only go 4K at up to 30 frames a second on the P30 Pro. Now, I couldn't really demonstrate HDR10 Plus or 4K 60 frames a second in this video because this video is not in HDR10 Plus and it's at 4K 30 frames a second, but it's nice to have those additional options on the S10 Plus. So if you're somebody who likes taking a lot of video, then I'd say that the S10 Plus is the better overall option. That's what I think anyway. What do you guys think? Definitely drop me a comment below and let me know your thoughts. If you want to see lots of images from lots of different devices, then do give me a follow on Instagram. I'm at SuperSaf. And if you haven't already, then be sure to subscribe to this channel because we'll have lots more SuperSaf style videos coming up. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, then do hit that thumbs up button for me. Thanks for watching. This is Saf on SuperSaf TV. I'll see you next time.